Okay, first up, Dynaxiom 0400. It talks about this gap, right, between what humans can possibly know and, well, what's universally known. And it suggests that's kind of where superstition might grow. Makes you wonder.
Right. That ties into this concept of the human Umwelt, our unique sensory world. It's how we perceive reality, which is, different from a bat or a dolphin or the universe itself. And superstition, like the source says, can definitely find room in that gap, especially where we don't fully grasp our own senses. It's like we say, I heard something, not just I sensed something. That small difference. It shows maybe we don't fully get our own sensory input, let alone anything else's. So we fill the gaps, sometimes with superstition.
Okay, I see. So our individual senses create one layer of not knowing. What about how we connect with others? That leads to Dynaxiom 0405. We're all from tribes, not countries. That really makes you think about connection, doesn't it? And shared perception, or lack thereof.
It really does. And biologically speaking, this tribal nature is, well, it's deep. Our brains are sort of wired for it. Patricia Churchland talks about this. Social behaviors feel good. Grooming, cooperation. And being shunned feels bad, physically, almost. Neurochemicals of vasopressin, oxytocin, they handle that bonding. Then there's Scott Atran's work on neurological conformity, group pressure, ideology. It can actually change how our brains process information. Like literally recalibrate parts of the brain for visual processing.
Wow. Seriously?
Yeah. So who we're with, our tribe, can actually shape how we see the world.
That's incredible that our brains physically change based on our group. So does that mean universal understanding is impossible or just harder?
Yeah.
And how does beauty fit in? Dynaxiom 0408 says, beauty finds itself and its beholder.
That's a lovely one. It reframes beauty, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It's not about everyone agreeing something is beautiful. The idea is that authentic beauty, it finds its audience. It resonates with someone. It doesn't need universal validation. It just needs that connection. So creators can trust their vision, even if it's niche. It'll find its people. And interestingly, the source mentions quite a few of these Dynaxioms have inspired songs, this one included.
That's a freeing thought. Beauty finding its own audience. Okay, so building on how we're shaped, let's talk about how we shape ourselves. Dynaxiom 0401. This feels very personal. How you use your mind and how you spend your time is what you'll become. Powerful stuff.
It is. And it brings up this key difference between what's installed in us and what's instilled.
Yeah.
Installed is like our DNA, hardwired stuff, predispositions. Instilled is more like family patterns, the environment we grew up in, epigenetics even, how our genes get expressed because of our experiences. So it's both. Nature, the installed, and nurture, the instilled, they both make us who we are. It's ongoing.
A constant mix of nature and nurture. Okay. That leads nicely into fate versus destiny. Dynaxiom 0400 says fate has a way of concealing its intention. Intriguing.
Carolyn Mice has a really interesting take on this. She suggests life is partly about developing enough self-awareness to hear your inner guidance, your intuition. When you follow that, you're moving towards destiny. You're steering. But if you're mostly driven by outer guidance, what others expect, pressures, just drifting, then you're more likely caught up in fate. It's really about agency. Listening inwards versus just reacting outwards.
That's a great distinction. Inner versus outer guidance. Destiny versus fate. So if someone feels like they're just drifting, maybe tuning into that inner voice is the first step. Okay, let's shift gears slightly. Learning and creativity. Dynaxiom 0409 suggests learning something sometimes means doing it someone else's way. That sounds almost counter-creative, doesn't it?
It can seem that way at first glance, yeah. But it points to two ways to approach creativity, really. You can stick with what you know, refine your style. Or you open up to new possibilities. And opening up often means, well, learning new skills, even things you're not good at initially. There's a nuance, of course. Knowing too much theory can sometimes get in the way of a unique style. That's true. But if you want a certain result, you often have to learn that specific technique. Like the source mentions, want that silkscreen look. You might actually need to learn silk screening. Want to use jazz harmony. You got to learn the theory. It's about adding tools to your creative box.
Right, expanding the toolkit to expand the possibilities. Makes sense. Okay, let's zoom out a bit. Wider perspective. Dynaxiom 0406. Think in centuries, not just day by day.
Yeah, this is about taking the long view. Historical perspective. The idea is look back 500 years, understand those patterns, those shifts. That gives you a much better lens, maybe a more realistic one for thinking about the next 500 years. It pulls you out of the daily noise and immediate trends, gives you context, scale, which day-to-day thinking just can't.
That long view definitely puts things in perspective. And speaking of cycles, but maybe more personal ones, Dynaxiom 0403 Sometimes it's good to taste the ordinary to see if it's become exotic again, and vice versa. I like this one.
It's a simple, but I think profound observation about appreciation. You go out, you try all the exotic things, lots of different experiences, flavors. Then you come back to something simple, vanilla, as the source puts it. And suddenly that simple thing can feel incredibly exciting, satisfying, maybe even better than the exotic stuff. It's about rediscovering value in the familiar, realizing novelty isn't everything. Sometimes the most exotic experience is finding the magic in the everyday again.
That's a great reminder. Finding the exotic in the ordinary. Okay, now for a really big thought experiment. Dynaxiom 0404. Imagine an asteroid hits at the same time as a nuclear war breaks out. The question is, who would or even could know the actual cause?
Right. This points to that deep ambiguity when extreme events overlap. Like, is the power out because of lightning, or was it a solar flare that happened at the same time? Who knows? The source uses this to talk about synchronicity, how seemingly random, unrelated events can align. The universe's randomness shaping our fate in ways we can't predict or maybe even understand. It positions us as handmaidens of synchronicity, just reminding us how much is outside our control. Sometimes the why just dissolves. The source also reflects on synchronicity in the political cycle, mentioning the timing of the January 6 hearings and the 2024 election cycle. It frames that convergence as a potential asteroid impact moment for or against democracy. But it's crucial to note the source itself doesn't take a side here. It just points out the synchronicity.
Okay, that's a heavy thought. Handmaidens of synchronicity. And a good point about the source just observing, not taking sides. All right, let's wind down with a couple of more specific observations. Dynaxiom 0407 gives us 2 rules of fashion. First rule, you have to look weird. Second rule, you can't look like it feels uncomfortable.
Yes. It captures that balance, doesn't it? Weird, meaning unique, standing out, pushing boundaries. You need that element. But if it looks physically uncomfortable, if the person looks like they're struggling in the clothes, the whole effect collapses. So it's about finding that sweet spot between avant-garde and actual wearability. Confidence makes it work.
Right, the confidence factor. Makes sense. And finally, a very precise musical analogy from Dynaxiom 042M. Beats are to rhythms as drum machines are to percussionists.
Yeah, this unpacks a neat distinction. Beats are like the building blocks. They contain rhythms and drum machines. They're tools. Percussionists can definitely use them. But rhythms are bigger than just beats. They have groove, feel, interaction. And programming a beat on a machine isn't the same as, the physical, nuanced art of drumming. It's about respecting the parts in the whole, the tool versus the craft or the artist. And if we circle back to thinking in centuries and that idea of synchronicity, it leaves us with a question, perhaps, for you listening. Thinking about how much is instilled in us and how we might be, caught up in these synchronicities. What's one small thing you can maybe choose consciously today? One small choice to steer yourself a bit more towards your destiny, not just fate.